And look, I love that about your series, that, it just brings real people together and to talk about themselves. Because I think a lot in society and business, we put labels on people, and then those labels put people in a box. And so we make judgments and assessments based on those labels. I have incredible admiration and respect for nurses and, the people on the front line who are caring for people when they're at their most vulnerable. We're not necessarily trying to make the workforce feminine, but because it's been so masculine, it has to shift, and it has in part, and it's still got more shifting to go.
Haere mai from my heart place to your heart place, Mark, to Heart Place Hospital podcast.
Oh, Jackie, it's great to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. So you and I are LinkedIn buddies, and you're across the ditch in Australia. I'm here in New Zealand. And you put a post up a few months ago, and I made a comment, and then a wee rift came out of it, which was really cool. And I think that'll come out in this conversation too, just the synchronicities and the alignments that we have. The accidental advocates, I call us, accidental and in inverted commas. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think LinkedIn's a funny place, and it's great that it brings great people together. And I've really enjoyed that. I think I mentioned to you when we caught up last that I've been a historical introvert, and I've really struggled to, get out of my shell. And it's interesting that the virtual world of LinkedIn has actually helped me a little bit to do that. And I've just been a bit more bold over the last, couple of years, and just, trying to make those numbers as they add up on your connections list, like genuine connections. So, when I connect to someone, I always say, if you'd like to catch up for a chat, I'd love to, and that way I can learn what they're about, they can learn what I'm about, and it just becomes more than, an artificial connection. And I loved your comments around, room on the broom. And I could tell that, we're both a bit rebellious. So I think we connected that way.
Yeah. We colour outside the lines, don't we? Yeah. I do that too. I ask, what made you connect with me on LinkedIn? I'm curious what made you connect, just to see if there is an impactful reason. And I think there's so many of us now right around the whole world, and that's what I love about LinkedIn is that connection, is that we're looking at things now and going, oh, actually it's on us. We can't rely on a government or whatever, the knight in shining armour to create change. It's on us who are actually got our feet on the ground to be the change makers and the earth shakers, which is exciting and frightening all at the same time. And that's why I think these connections and collaborations and sharing our stories is so important, because then we're A, not alone, but B, we can tap into each other's expertise. So I call them healing round tables. So not having that hierarchy or leadership, so to speak, so much, or management. I love leadership over management. And that sort of segues me into your bio, which is 20 years of leadership experience in both the public and the private sectors. And you've specialised in people and culture and an accredited executive leadership coach. So these are the sort of expertise that, certainly me, my whole professional life has been on the floor as a nurse. So I was, my hands on. So I think these connections are really, really cool. They really do make us amplify and be more bold. So a little bit more about you, project management and change management. So, when I talk about change makers and earth shakers, you've been in that arena. human resource management, strategy development and transformation. These are all the things I love. I'm doing lots of business rebirthing at the moment with a lot of our visitors to the hospital because they're finding the expertise that they have in the institutions that they're working in is actually literally burning them out or causing them harm. So there's lots of transformation going on. So yeah, so there's so much goodness here, which is not my typical visitor to the podcast, but I think it's really important that we have a lot of scope and range and experience and different places that we've had our hands in the mud. So yeah, I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. And look, I love that about your series, that, you know, it just brings real people together and to talk about themselves, because I think a lot in society and business, we put labels on people, and then those labels put people in a box. And so we make judgments and assessments based on those labels. So you go, oh, Mark's a project manager, or, you know, Mark's a, you know, this. And it's like, well, yes, but, you know, I'm also a dad and a husband, you know, and as you said, an accidental activist and a bit of a nerd, and, you know, and I think, I'm not sure if I fit the criteria, but I think I'm probably a feminist as well. And that's probably been increasing, you know, over recent years, but it's always kind of been there. You know, I grew up in a single parent family with my mum and just four of us. And I think that definitely started to shape my thinking around parenting and, you know, well, in the 80s and probably still now to an extent, you know, the motherhood burden and you know, the tendencies for the load to fall onto the mother and the impacts of that, both logistically, mentally, and you know, to see that as a child, I think that definitely shaped me. And so, you know, it's interesting that your background is in nursing. You know, a lot of my management roles are in the health sector, in hospital environments, working with nurses, you know, so I really enjoyed that part of it as well, because even though I was in an administrative capacity, I have incredible admiration and respect for nurses and, you know, the people on the front line who are caring for people when they're at their most vulnerable. And, you know, I think I did well in those situations because I had an empathy for the workforce. I had an empathy for the patients. And I think that allowed me to kind of, you know, manage well, because I wasn't seeing people as numbers or figures. I was seeing people as people and try to put strategies in place for what people needed. You know, and I remember getting a bit off topic here, but, you know, one specific argument I had with a head of ophthalmology was around a wait list of patients who had glaucoma. And, you know, I literally kind of stood up and said, do you want these people to go blind? Because if you don't, we need to do something about this now. And, you know, and then we did something and none of them went blind, thankfully. So, you know, that kind of impact on people is something that I've always been driven to, you know, and I think that it's just taken different forms over the years. And, you know, now that I'm a dad with a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, my 5-year-old is a boy, so I have a 5-year-old son and an 8-year-old daughter, and that's shaped me as well, you know, absolutely changed my perspective since becoming a dad, and still does on a regular basis. And it's made me, probably intensified. I think it's always been there, but intensified the desire to make the world a better place, you know, because we're not here for a long time, regardless of your, you know, spiritual beliefs, but we have an opportunity to either, you know, help to make things better or just remain passive and I've never been passive. So I think, that's kind of how we intersected. And, my undergrad was in psychology, and I've done a lot of sports coaching. So I think, I've had an eclectic career and set of experiences. I went to public schools and private schools. I was very poor as a child. I was literally the kid who couldn't afford new shoes, and there was holes in the shoes, and my toes were hanging out the end, and I couldn't afford the stationery. And so, but I'm very fortunate now, I suppose, to earn an above average income, live in an above average house, and my kids are very well catered for, which has taken a lot of work, but I think it's given me perspective of just getting to know all different types of people throughout my life and career.
So I call you and myself a bridge. So a bridge of experiencing the polarities. And so for me, it's very much the bridge of the science and the magic. But because there's been so much science, I love to see the evidence as well with it too. So very much science-based magic.
Yeah.
And I know, like, for you and I, our something that we have in common is, and you use the word equality, I use the word equity. I always think about that meme where there's a brick wall and leaning on a box, the same size box, and some people can see over the brick wall when some people aren't tall enough or high enough to see over the brick wall. So I love to talk about equity, so that the boxes are the height that you need so you can see over the wall.
Sorry, no.
Yeah, and so of course I'm very passionate about the feminine. So not talking about woman, the feminine. And interesting when you use the word feminist, I think again you're kind of talking about the feminine as well. And the feminine to me is feeling, is that play, it's the flow, it's the allowing. And when we feel, we reveal, and we can deal and we can heal. And so for me, I'm so passionate about feminising our health and education system so that we can allow these soft, safe sanctuaries for us to show up as we are in that given moment, because we are ever evolving. And particularly if you've come into this world as a woman, we're more so, we're very cyclical. And we're educating and we're employing in a very non-cyclical environment, which when you're in an environment that you aren't designed to live in, you think about any other animal, we don't thrive. And so consequently what's happening is we've got a huge population of people not thriving. And then we've got these institutions that are so like we just can't cater for them. Again, think about an animal example. And so we're just going on this vicious circle. And this is where we came in. We're kind of like, actually, come on, guys. And this is where the accidental part comes in, because we're like, how come you guys, let's, come on. And like you say, some people are like, oh, it's life, suck it up, buttercup. But some of us have got this DNA or this, I don't know, this part in us that are like, actually, you know what? It's a do or die. This is do or die for me. Is that how you feel? Do you feel like it's like?
Absolutely. And I think, I'm just connecting with so much that you're saying, because I think the feminizing is such an important lens to look through in the stage that we're in. And I think accidentally, again, I've been doing that, throughout my career. If you think about the theoretical kind of masculine traits and styles versus the theoretical more feminine traits and styles. And so, growing up with the exposure that I had and having sisters, and most of my friends were girls growing up, and I wasn't probably your average teenage boy in the 90s, in the sense that I wasn't interested in chasing girls as objects. I had a great, they were my friends. So, I wasn't, how I treated people in general mattered to me. And, my social circles were, and as a result of that, theoretically, but I think there's a lot of practice to this as well, feminine relationships are different to masculine relationships, and I've got examples of that now in my now, plus 40 years friendships, whereby my best mate lives in London and we talk probably 2 or 3 times a year. And when we talk, it's kind of like, hey mate, how's it going? And he's like, yeah, good. You? Yeah, I'm good. Okay. Well, yeah, I'll talk to you soon, and that's pretty, and that's just the way that a lot of male conversations go. And sometimes, we're both nerds, so we get into the other stuff too, but it's a very direct, conversation generally. And, but growing up with feminine relationships, I became generally better, I suppose, at empathy and conversation, because that's kind of,
we love that.
How do you feel? And this person said this, and so that gave me a certain lens, that I started to see the world through, and I think that a lot of what I've been doing in the corporate sector over the past 20 years has, in a way, been kind of feminizing the environment, because for so long, the patriarchy and men have dominated the corporate sector. And as a result of that, the culture in organizations has been very, masculinized, whereby it's about, the loudest and the more aggressive and the more controlling and kind of that type of culture has been the way to lead organizations. And through the efforts toward equality, and I could probably talk all day just about the equality versus equity thing, but I think the efforts towards equity or equality have been around feminizing the workforce, but in an egalitarian kind of way, whereby we're not necessarily trying to make the workforce feminine, but because it's been so masculine, like it has to shift, and it has in part, and it's still got more shifting to go. Even in the last 5 to 10 years, significant changes in the workforce. COVID's probably been a catalyst for that in some ways, but I think even before COVID, there was that kind of appetite to be more human towards people, and I think so I've kind of been doing it accidentally, and even if I think back to when I was sports coaching, when I was like 17, 18, 19, I didn't have any of the theory behind me. This was pre psychology graduate and pre-life experience, but I wasn't yelling and shouting at my athletes, and I was talking to them and going, hey, how does that make you feel? Or if people weren't aligning to values, or treating people with respect, I'd be saying, mate, that's not okay. Like we're a part of a team. We need to look after each other. Part of our role is to nurture and care for each other. So I think even before I realized what I was doing it, and now I've just got more words to put around it.
Yeah, totally. So you're an empath.
Mm.
No, yeah.
And at times, to an extreme, and to a point where, like I can't watch certain things on TV because I just get too drawn in and emotional. Like I really connect with the subject matter, and I just can't. Like if there's anything around rape or violence, especially towards children, I just can't. I can't watch it. I'll just be a blubbering mess on the couch from my wife, and like it's just a show. It's just,
I know, they're acting. Yeah.
Kids, and so definitely, high on empathy over the years.
I remember when I was a kid, and Bouncer went missing on Home and Away.
Yeah,
And that was
yeah.
cry when Bouncer went missing on Home and Away. So, but it was very much like, toughen up and hide those feelings, and go to your room and come back when you're happy, and here's 10 cents worth of mixed lollies to make you happy. And so it was really challenging for us to actually understand our feelings and emotions. And this is what I just really passionate about, is having more and more examples, and that's why I love having you on, having more and more examples of people in the world who are highly empathic, who feel big time, but creating these soft sanctuaries for them to do that, because when they feel, they reveal, deal, and heal, and then they create solutions. They create high energy environments for others to do the same. So the ripple effect is phenomenal. It's unbelievable. You know yourself, when you go out as an empathic person, if you smile, people will smile. You'll see other people smile back.
Yeah.
We're pretty magical. Yeah.
I love, and that's part of what drove me to study psychology, is because I just genuinely love understanding how people think and act. It's like what drives people to think and act in a certain way. The nature versus nurture, conversation is really interesting. And especially now as a parent, it's almost like the greatest experiment in the world, whereby, you're watching these humans, grow, and you're like, how is that? Did I do that? Or is that just you? Or, and which part of it is biological and ingrained, and which part of it is conditioned. So I think that's part of what's driven, me in the last couple of years to try to look more at kids. And you mentioned before about, kind of problem solving. And it's like, I think a lot of what we do in the corporate sector and in the workplace, that's not just the corporate sector, every workplace is very reactive. It's like, oh, this happened, so we're going to do this. And I think it's a Desmond Tutu quote, whereby, we need to stop pulling people out of the river. We need to go up the river and find out why they're falling in the first place. And I think there's been a lot of things happening over the last few years that have, I suppose, centered around issues of violence and women and children and overlapping issues of the three, that then have made me think, it's like, well, where does this start? And if we're really serious about making things better for the future, making the future a better place than we've grown up in, surely there's got to be like preventative efforts that we can put into place, rather than just reactive band-aids. So yeah,
that's something I've been advocating at several schools, and this is this sticky bit about being a visionary, and about being the accidental advocate who has said yes to the role, is that often they don't quite understand the language that's been used, and despite taking in references and statistics and evidence, but explaining to them in schools that these experiences and these environments can manifest the outcomes of our mental and physical reality. And so if it's like we're talking about more nurturing and more connecting, more asking what that other person needs, then we're going to have these great outcomes, great physical, mental outcomes. So which is going to lay off our very, very heavily fractured health systems. But equally, if there are experiences or environments that aren't supportive, then it's it's going to be detrimental mental and physical outcomes, which we just don't have the resource for. And that's where Heart Place Hospital comes in. So we're really passionate about upskilling and supporting our frontline workers so that they are meeting our young people as another person, that they are understanding and celebrating them, and the reason that they can do that is because they understand and celebrate themselves.
Yeah.
So we actually start by serving those who serve our most vulnerable citizens. And that, like I say, the ripple effect is just so much faster than if we take on the likes of us who then, we Desmond Tutus, we've been pulled out. We've had our, what I call my Matt Trip moment, the wake up and kind of gone, okay, so that was unpleasant. How can we make that more pleasant for others?
Yeah. That's so wonderful. I love your business model. I love that you do that. I think it's so important in the world. And I think that, with a background in sport, I liken it to the high performance model, because, and this isn't, I hope this doesn't come across cold, but, sport shaped me, and so because I like to win, I'm driven, I like to succeed. But I think the definition of winning and succeed needs to be taken cautiously, and that it's not at the expense of humanity, but that the humanity is the winning. So I think that if we think about the high performance model in sport, we need to apply that to a high performance concept in schools and a high performance concept in workplaces, and probably to an extent a high performance concept in communities, whereby, well, what does success look like as a community? And I think there's a lot to be said about judging a community on the way it treats its most vulnerable, and that's part of what's been driving me lately is this research and these realizations of where we put our money, as a government, in Australia at least, when there are a lot of really needy people, like the homeless, the underprivileged, the low income earners, and yet we continue to kind of prop up the people and the kids that don't really need it, and it's not the kid's fault. Like, no child is at fault for what they're born into, So some children are born into poverty. That's not their fault. Some children are born into privilege. That's not their fault. But as a government and a society, I think we've got a responsibility to give every child the best chance at life, and I think we can do better.
Oh, I agree. I don't get it. I actually don't get it. I don't get that we have a world where we have to talk about diversity and inclusion. It doesn't penetrate into any part of my being.
Well, I think it touches on what we were talking about before about feminising. If we look at workplaces, and it was a big push a few years ago. I'm not sure if it filtered across the ditch, but, in Australia, it was called the Women on Boards Initiative, whereby, there was a big push to try and get 50-50 or close to it, and I'm not saying that gender is binary, but this was the push at the time. But, there was a 50-50 goal for boards, to try and get more women on boards, because most boards were heavily dominated by men, and still are in some instances. And so that Women on Boards initiative was successful to an extent that it got more women on boards, but it also revealed that the culture was still very masculine. And so what we expected of women who were going into those leadership roles is like, well, you'll be welcome here at the table, providing that you act like a man, basically. So you need to prioritize work over family. You need to be okay with sexist jokes. You need to, be quite cold, in a business context. And so it's really only probably the last 5 years where I've started to notice a shift corporately, whereby, that type of patriarchal way of leading is now considered very outdated. And not really going to deliver the best results in a business context. So if you apply that thinking to schools, for example, we still run schools in a command and control way in many instances, which is from, late 1800s kind of, or even colonial, but built on industrial, patriarchal systems whereby, kids have to do as they're told, shut up and listen, don't talk back, don't challenge, don't be different, don't be creative, be the same as everyone else, stand in line, and do what your teacher says because they're your teacher, and that's it, And so I think if you think about that in a high performance concept, it doesn't fit, it doesn't, and it's definitely not psychologically safe. If we look at some of the topical conversations at the moment, and because I play in the consulting and HR spaces, psychological safety and psychosocial hazards are very topical. And it's like, well, is this environment going to yield the best outcome for this child? If what we want downstream are creative, innovative, confident people who are comfortable being themselves, are we creating school environments that lay the foundation for that or not? And so that's been, something I've been looking into.
And I'd love this to come into the podcast, and hope people listen to it that are in this space. So something like I mentioned, I've advocated at a few schools, and I have actually seen change. I went to a prize giving, and they were giving out prizes. I'm trauma trained, so they were actually giving out prizes like they were Academy Awards to students with trauma response behaviours. So like there was, drum roll. There was, and this student comes to class early and takes all the chairs down, and this student stays at the end of class and puts all the chairs away and checks all the other students' work is perfect, and very trauma response behaviours, and they were being rewarded in front of the entire community. And I had to go to the school and say, you're showing a celebration of an adaptation that's not serving that young person.
Yeah.
You're saying into the community that this is success.
Yeah.
Whereas
it's scary, and I think from and I'm not a academic, and I'm not an expert in many ways when we're talking about creating better societies or, school systems. But I have done a lot of reading and talking in the last 2 years to people all over the world, and I think there's a lot of similarities between the Australian school system and the New Zealand school system. And it's been really interesting to try and, if you think about the population's knowledge, say as a normal distribution bell curve, and so you've got most people understand kind of the main stuff in the middle, and there's a small group of people that don't really understand much at all, and there's a small group of people that kind of understand a lot, and if you think about probably maybe academics and researchers who are at the front line of, really trying to dig into evidence-based, information, they're probably at the tail end of the bell curve. And so the things that I'm just learning now, because I've probably been in the middle, they've known for 20 years. Like, they've known that we're doing this to kids. They've known that, we're conditioning kids in this way. And it's a lot of parents that I talk to as peers, we're probably in the middle group as well, as 70 to 80% of people probably are. We just didn't realise, I didn't realise. And I feel stupid and ignorant that I didn't. But I'm glad I kind of am starting to now, because I think it's going to benefit my kids and hopefully other kids too, if we can influence and change. But little things like, the Human Rights Act in Queensland, doesn't apply to kids in private schools. So, it's like, when you say that, it's like, hang on a minute, how did that happen? And I didn't know that as a parent, and for a short point in time, we were sending our kids to a private school, and at no point in time was it ever, kind of discussed that, by sending your kids here, you're kind of signing over their human rights from a legal perspective. And you're saying that the rules at the school are more important to you than their fundamental human rights of, individual expression and freedom of choice and all of this stuff that we take for granted in a supposed society like Australia. And so I really have disliked politics for most of my life. I've avoided it because I don't like the spin and I don't like, I like authentic relationships. And I think, there's a lot of half-truths in politics. But it's only the last 2 years that I've started to dig into it more because, unfortunately, the legislation and the policies that happen at a government level inform things like whether or not your child will have human rights at school. And so it's like, well, hang on a minute. I need to know how this works. Like, how does a law come into effect that actually deprives kids of human rights and everyone's just okay with it, And so that type of research has kind of driven me and still drives me. I'm literally sending messages to people every day going, can you explain to me how this works? How does one change this? Like, what's it going to take? So I'm still on that journey.
And you know how I started at the beginning, that we need to find each other. We're missing pieces because we do have all these different expertise and different connections, and that's how we are going to create change. We can't do it on our own, and that's why we've been. That's why patriarchy occurred, was to segregate us so that we wouldn't be powerful together. But we're so powerful together. So, and in the case that I was shared, they have changed it. They've stopped doing the Academy Awards prizes. So it can happen. Us worker bees can be the change makers, and that's why I really wanted to have you on to this podcast, is to share, we can find each other. We're magnetic to find it, stop us, try and stop us. We're going to find each other and we're going to have the conversations. And, I've learned, I didn't know that. So that's something I've learned. Now it's part of my understanding. And I get it. Clearly, we've got some sort of design in us. We've come from some sort of star or whatever you believe in, that we we were put down at this time to be the change makers, the earth shakers, to speak up, to show up, and to stay standing. And because we've learnt that we are, part of our human experience is evolving and changing and moving, is that when we get knocked down, the nose, the mocking, the ridicules, we get back up again, because we're like, oh, actually, this is I said yes to this. This is my life on purpose, and I just not available for not living life on purpose.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. It's been a great conversation, and I'm going to love sharing this. I love having. I'm getting more men on this podcast, which I think it's really important to get that voice from you guys as well, and because that's how we can balance out the masculine and the feminine, and we can bring back that divine masculine, which is not so, controlled, and it's more protective. It's more walking alongside the feminine, and the feminine is more of that kind of creative, receiving energy, and the masculine is that giving energy. So thank you for being part of the receiving and the giving, the yin and the yang, and look forward to sharing this, and I look forward to more conversations with you, and look forward to seeing what sort of changes we can create in the world. Your kids are a bit younger than mine, so I wish you well. And on the other side of the ditch, if you ever need to have a virtual coffee. I just love for you to share with our listeners if anything that you've said is ringing some bells and they'd like to connect with you. And also, like, what's in your heart place right now? Like, what's something's coming up in your heart place that you'd like to share with the listeners, and how can people find you?
Yeah, look, great. Thank you so much, Jackie. I would love the chat, and I would love future chats if the opportunity arises. I think what's my focus at the moment is trying to influence more equity in the Australian school system, because I've noticed a lot of inequity. You know, I've got a personal story that relates to my son, and sex discrimination at school, and a whole heap of things that we don't necessarily need to go into now, but that it catalysed me to look into schools and equity in schools, and it became very obvious to me quickly that inequity wasn't just about gender; it was very intersectional across all paradigms. And so that kind of sparked my research, and I've realised what many have known already for a long time, that our school system is not equitable. It does not support the kids that need it most in the way that they need support in an equitable way. We've got private schools building Olympic standard sporting facilities propped up by taxpayer funds, while we've got kids at public schools who can't afford their own stationery. So I think there's a huge opportunity to work together, to try and change that, because 65% of Australians will go to a public school. So the strength is there in numbers, but people need to be catalysed into action. I think we need to take people from the passive to the active. If you sit back and do nothing, nothing changes. And if you want a more equitable society and a more equitable future for your kids and the next generation, well, you can't sit back. And so that's something that I'm working on now with a few people. So yeah, that's in terms of, what's close to my heart at the moment. That's it. And I hope that we can make a difference.
Beautiful. And how can people find you?
Yeah, so people can find me on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way internationally. You could also email me, and we could put my email in the podcast notes, so that's fine. And yeah, look, I love catching up with people, and if there's a way that we can help each other, I love that, because I think the world is made up of people who are prepared to help each other. And if we're not prepared to help each other, then it's not really a world that I want to live in. So I think, more than happy to help if I can help. And, as you said, with 6 points of separation, everyone knows everyone. So, let's try to connect people, and let's try to get things done.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mark. And thanks everyone for listening to the Heart Place Hospital podcast, where we care for the carers.
Thanks, Jackie.